Good evening. Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Jennifer Surtees. We warmly welcome the family of Trooper Harry Hoskin, whose story will be told shortly by Brigadier Rupert Hoskin, who is Trooper Harry Hoskin's great-great-nephew. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It could also be a place that would help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Trooper Harry Hoskin. Harry Hoskin was born in 1896 on his family's farm, known as the Home Farm at Boscastle in Cornwall, England, the second of 7 children of Henry and Mary Hoskin. He attended the grammar school in Camelford, but by the age of 15 was working for his father on the farm. In 1913, the 18-year-old Harry left home and emigrated to Australia. He does not appear to have travelled to Australia alone. 2 friends, Richard Bowring and Henry Stevens, also travelled with him. Arriving in Victoria, the group found work as stock riders at Barwon Hills in Winchelsea. Hoskin and his mates would no doubt have been aware of the storm clouds of war building up in Europe. After the outbreak of the First World War in August 1914, the 3 men travelled from Winchelsea to Geelong, where they enlisted together on the 30th of November. After a period of training at Broadmeadows Camp, Hoskin and Bowring were posted to the 5th Reinforcements to the 8th Light Horse Regiment. Stevens was posted to the 5th Reinforcements to the 4th Light Horse Regiment. The 3 friends embarked with other reinforcements from Melbourne on the 7th of May 1915 aboard the transport ship Palermo, bound for Gallipoli. During the voyage, Hoskin and another Englishman he'd met during training acted as medical orderlies. One of Hoskin's friends wrote, "His great attention to a chap who was ill was only one example of his unselfish and sacrificing character, which made him popular with us all." Hoskin arrived on Gallipoli on the 5th of August and joined his unit, stationed at Walker's Ridge. Hoskin and Bowring were posted to separate troops. The new arrivals would have found the Anzac positions to be a hive of activity as the Allied August offensive was about to begin. At 4:30 p.m. the following afternoon, Australian infantrymen charged Ottoman positions at Lone Pine, which began a 3-day battle of a nature even Dante would have found had trouble describing. The light horsemen over at the neck heard the roar of men and the weapons of war and knew it was to be their turn only some 12 hours hence. The attack on the neck, carried out by the light horsemen, was to be the hammer blow to trap the Ottomans against the anvil of the New Zealanders, who were to advance up Rhododendron Ridge and capture Baby 700, a feature above the neck. A determined Ottoman defence had delayed the New Zealanders, and by rights this should also have caused a delay in the Australian attack. Instead, the orders were still to go, with the hope that the attack by the Australians would instead assist the New Zealanders. It was with a great deal of courage and much trepidation that the light horsemen of the 8th, who were the first 2 waves of the attack, made their preparations in the early hours of the 7th of August. A heavy bombardment by the Royal Navy on the Ottoman positions forced the Ottoman defenders to abandon their front line and seek the safety of their rear trenches and dugouts. But at 4:23 a.m, the guns, which were meant to fire right up to the moment of the attack at 4:30 a.m, ceased firing. This gave the Ottoman defenders ample time to return to their firing line and set up and test fire their weapons. The Australians, knowing what awaited them, quietly shook hands with one another. The commanding officer of the 8th Light Horse, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander White, who would lead his men over the top, made his way along the line, ensuring his men were all right. At 4:30 a.m, White blew his whistle and the first wave rose from their trenches with a roar. But the roar of the Ottoman machine guns, rifles and bombs, a veritable tornado of steel and lead, scythed down the first wave in about 30 seconds. White was killed no more than 5 metres from the trench. The second wave of the 8th went over soon after and met a similar fate. 2 further waves of the 10th Light Horse went over at 4:45 a.m, and after a delay during which attempts were made to stop the slaughter, the 4th wave went over shortly after 5:15 a.m. Of the 600 men who took part in the attack at the neck, 372 became casualties. The 8th Light Horse suffered 234 casualties, including 154 men killed. The 10th Light Horse had suffered 138 casualties, of whom 80 had been killed. Among the dead were Harry Hoskin, aged 19, and his mate Dick Bowring, aged 20. Both men had been on Gallipoli for less than 48 hours. Hoskin and Bowring's unidentified friend, who had gone over the top with Hoskin at the neck and survived, later wrote a letter to Dick Bowring's mother about her son's death. As he did not have Hoskin's home address, he asked Mrs. Bowring to pass the news on to his parents. In the letter, aside from mentioning their shared time as medical orderlies, he asked her to let Mr. Hoskin know that his son was a lad to be proud of. He concluded, "This cruel war has made many sore hearts, but I think it is some consolation to you to know they were soldiers and gentlemen always." Of the three friends from Boscastle, only Henry Stevens would survive the war. The bodies of Hoskin, Bowring and so many others could not be retrieved and remained unburied where they fell until Charles Bean's Gallipoli mission returned to the peninsula in 1919. In the process of burying the Australian and Ottoman remains, only 5 Australians could be identified. Hoskin was not among them. His name, along with over 4,000 other Australians with no known grave, was added to the Lone Pine Memorial to the missing. Harry Hoskin's name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of sacrifice and service told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Trooper Harry Hoskin, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. we leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening.